Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 13, 2024 Barcroft Working Group meeting. Thanks again for participating in the Land Use Analysis Review of the Barcroft Apartments Master Financing and Development Plan, or MFDP. We look forward to working with designated stakeholders. We are grateful to have spent this time working with designated stakeholders to review Gyre Lynch's vision for Barcroft in the context of existing community policies. Then before we tonight's meeting, I'll go over some of the meeting logistics. The virtual meeting is being held tonight. The meeting being held tonight is being held virtually, and all participants are joining remotely. As far as specifics about how the meeting will run, it will be available to join from the Barcroft Apartments Land Use Analysis webpage and the county's events calendar. Additionally, there's a dial-in option for those who wish to use it. I see we have one person who is called in. I'll get to logistics on that shortly. If anyone loses internet connectivity during the meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. And if you are calling in by phone, please keep it muted. We'll keep your phone and your microphone muted until you're called upon to speak, turning off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. These tools are located as icons in your command bar. And if you do not see this on the toolbar, try tapping or clicking on the center of your screen and it will pop up. If you are not a member of the working group, we ask that you remain on mute with your video off so that teams can keep focus on the working group members. When a working group member is called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. And if you are dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute, and then I believe you press *6 again after you're finished speaking to remute your microphone. The meeting chat is available for technical assistance only and should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All comments must be shared verbally for the record. A reminder that tonight's conversation is limited to members of the working group roster and limited specifically to one member from each of the represented constituencies on the working group roster. While everyone else is invited to join and watch, we want to be mindful that this is a large group with a large task, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. If members want to be recognized in an item, please both use the raise hand function and turn on your video. I'll be looking for both, but keep your microphone muted. I'll use the video and the raised hand as an indicator of who wants to speak. Once you have been recognized, then you can unmute, and once you've completed speaking, please turn off both your microphone and your camera. For the person who is joining us by phone, could I just ask that you identify yourself real quickly?
Yes, it's Linda Dye representing Douglas Park.
Good evening, Linda. Thank you. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information, whether associated with the meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Tonight, we are going to be covering urban design, but also wrap up. Tonight is going to be a wrap-up presentation. We're going to begin with a presentation from staff. We'll have a presentation from Gyre Lynch, and then I am going to structure tonight's discussion a little bit differently than normal. I do want to save the last 5 to 10 minutes for public comment. If you're on now for the purpose of providing public comment, please say so in the chat. We will use the chat there to sort of get a sense of who wishes to provide public remarks. After the presentations, I'm going to invite, as usual, invite a popcorn style, invite the floor to submit clarifying questions popcorn style. I want to remind people that even though it can be hard to see the line between a clarifying question and a more substantive one, I sort of envision a clarifying question as being less than a minute to ask and taking less than a minute to answer. So please keep that in mind. After we don't have any more clarifying questions, we'll open the floor to more substantive questions and to any direct feedback, and then overall discussion. And tonight, just to keep us moving along, when we're in that general topical questions section, I might be reminding you might hear me give some gentle reminders that questions are interrogatives that end with a question mark. You might also hear me say, can you please come to a question? We'll then go to overall discussion, and then we're going to do something unique that we haven't done yet. I'm going to go from group to group, asking for and inviting closing comments to give everyone a chance to make sure that every group who's here tonight has a chance to sort of give their overall take. Here's the catch. We have 25 groups here, so I am going to be asking people to limit it to a minute. And at 90 seconds, I am going to start interrupting people and reminding you that you've gone over the time. The reason that, there are 25 people who I'm going to be calling on. So I want to start that section no later than 8:15 and then be able to do public comment, if any. So with that said, and Olivia, I'm going to, Marco, do you have, your camera is on. Is there anything that you wanted to raise as a question right away? You're on mute.
Oh, I'm good. I'm just saying hi to everyone.
Oh, hello. All right, Ms. Sontag, I'm going to turn it over to you for the staff presentation, and then we'll go to the applicant.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, we will try to move through this as quickly as possible. So just to give you an overview of what we'll be covering tonight, we do have a recap of some of the community engagement that's happened throughout this land use analysis process, primarily the feedback form that was open, and then the open house, which happened on Saturday, May 4th. We'll also be reviewing again some of those draft policy recommendations that will be going to the board in July, as well as the master financing and development plan, some of the land use elements that will be included in that document that will also go to the board in July. We'll then cover a remaining schedule between now and going to the board in July, the commission review that will occur, and then we'll also take a look at some of the work that's going to be happening in the second half of the year. And then as Commissioner Weir noted, we'll have a presentation from the applicant showing some of the evolutions of their proposal. So just another recap here. And a reminder, the online feedback form was open for approximately 6 weeks. The other primary engagement opportunity that we had was the open house, which happened on May 4th. And we are here at the final and 5th working group meeting tonight. Again, the purpose being to cover a recap of the feedback provided throughout this process, all of the available MFDP updates, and then again, some of those draft policy recommendations. So for the online feedback form, it was open for approximately 6 weeks between February and April. And again, thank you to everybody who shared this with your networks. As part of this process, staff set up in the leasing office with iPads to help promote the survey. We also attended a Barcroft Resident Council meeting and a resident voice meeting. Staff, with the help of Gates Hudson Property Management, also did a door-to-door distribution of a postcard to Barcroft residents, which yielded a great increase in the responses. We did have a total of 395 participants. About a third of those were Barcroft residents. And the survey included 4 questions. The first one was open to all participants, and it asked them to rank their top priorities beyond preserving the affordability of these units. So for Barcroft residents, the top 3 priorities were more parking than currently exists, preservation of Barcroft's historic garden apartment style and features, and then preservation and addition of trees, tree canopy, and natural areas. And then for non-resident priorities, some overlap, preservation of trees, tree canopy, and natural areas, open space and parks available to both residents and the surrounding community, and then vehicle, bike, and ped connections through Barcroft as another route parallel to Columbia Pike. Question 2 was for Barcroft residents only and asked about forms of travel both around Barcroft apartments and the immediate area around Arlington and Northern Virginia as a whole, and also to work. So as you can see here, primarily around Barcroft and the surrounding area, a lot of walking and use of cars. And then around Arlington and Northern Virginia, mostly vehicle usage, and then to work, again, vehicles, but also use of the bus system. And then questions 3 and 4 were open-ended and just asked residents to provide just anything else that they wanted the county or the Jared Lynch team to know. So for Barcroft residents, these were some of the most recurring comments that we saw. A lot of positive feelings about Barcroft Apartments as a whole, including the location, but also expressing a need for apartment maintenance and addressing other pest issues. Also just general concerns about increasing density at Barcroft. Some of the priorities identified were both improving amenities and improving safety and security. And then for non-residents, also concerns about increasing density at Barcroft and the increases in building heights. And then the priorities were ensuring Barcroft is a mixed income community with a mix of market rate and affordable units, and then alternatives to single occupancy vehicles for both Barcroft residents and surrounding community. And then there were quite a few shared priorities among the group, including maintaining affordability, not displacing residents, addressing those parking needs, as well as pedestrian, bike, and vehicular safety and connectivity through the site, preserving, expanding, and enhancing open space and trees, and then preserving architecture and the historical features on the site. So for the open house, it was held on Saturday, May 4th. We had it open for 3 hours just for anybody to come in and walk through. We did have a pretty great turnout, a mix of mostly residents, surrounding community members. We did have some working group members attend. We had 3 stations with staff members at each. Jared Lynch had some representatives there. Gates Hudson attended with a table for any residents with property management questions. We did also provide Spanish-English interpretation services. And then Studio Pause had a station and they organized a children's art activity. And then we also had food from the Pan American Bakery. For this event, we also distributed a door-to-door postcard, again, thanks to the help of the Gates Hudson property management team. And then during the event, staff helped to capture feedback on these boards here. You can see the photos in the picture, but on this next slide, we'll show you kind of a summary of the feedback. So on the open space, parks and nature station, lots of comments about keeping the trees, adding children's play areas, and including urban agriculture on site. For streets, parking, walking, biking paths, we heard a desire to improve bicycle and pedestrian connections, both to Doctors Run Park and the WNOD Trail, better lighting throughout the site, and then again to address parking issues. And then for urban design, which really is kind of like an umbrella of all of these topics, we heard the desire again for in-unit and on-site amenities, including washer dryers, benches throughout the site, a fitness center, a game room, also interest in bike infrastructure and environmental features, considering alternative energy sources and green roofs, and then more accessible units throughout the site. So moving on to our draft policy recommendations, many of these slides will look familiar. We've covered a couple of these a few times. So again, these are all of the adopted policies that we reviewed throughout this process. But at the end of this review, we've identified four documents that will need updates based on both the merits of the Jared Lynch proposal that we've been reviewing, staff analysis and recommendations, as well as some of the community feedback. So the next 4 slides will kind of summarize some of the changes that we can anticipate seeing in each of these 4 documents. So for the Columbia Pike Revitalization Plan, this was originally adopted in 2002 with a major update in 2005. So there are 2 significant changes here where we're proposing to remove 2 portions of these commercial corners from this plan and move them into the neighborhoods area plan. These earlier planning efforts focused on these commercial areas of the Pike and did provide guidance on how these areas could redevelop. It did envision maximum building heights, which were at the time set intentionally low to help transition to where these adjacent preserved garden style apartments would be preserved. And then on this next slide here, you can see this updated guidance, which was adopted in 2012, provided additional redevelopment opportunities along Columbia Pike and along these edges. And then preservation through the core. So again, kind of a re-envisioning of what these building heights and transitions would look like. The neighborhoods area plan also included additional guidance for the open space and some of the multimodal and transportation vision maps. So those will also be updated to reflect any of the changes in those multimodal paths that we've been reviewing over the past couple months. And then as well as incorporating those 2 corners on the northwest and the northeast that are being removed from the commercial code and incorporated into this neighborhoods area plan. And it will create a much more kind of seamless review of this proposal as we move forward, having all of the Barcroft property within the neighborhoods form-based code rather than split between the 2 different codes. And then the third update that we'll need to make is to the general land use plan. The general land use plan does distinguish between the commercial areas and the neighborhoods areas, as well as identify in this note 24A where the conservation area boundaries are. So we will have to go in and update the extent of those boundaries where those are changing. And then for the master transportation plan, we will need to update any future planned streets that we've been reviewing as part of this process. So those you can see here are in some of these white lines on the existing master transportation plan map. And then we'll also need to update any future planned bike connections that will need to be relocated and then reclassified to better accommodate some of this kind of multimodal connectivity that we've been talking about through this east-west connection on 12th Road, especially now that we're not envisioning construction of an 11th Street on the property. So again, some of those specific updates will be, changing from a planned on-street route for 12th Road to a planned bike lane, planned off-street trail, which was originally shown west of Thomas Street, will be accommodated in a different portion of the site. And then there will be planned bike lanes also added to Wakefield Street as well as South 4 Mile Run Drive. So again, these are the remaining policy documents that we did review where these ones will not have any changes included. This is where the Gyre Lynch proposal will need to be updated to reflect consistency with all of these plans. So moving into the master financing and development plan, when this was originally reviewed, it includes a land use chapter within it, but as part of this process, we are developing a more robust chapter. So these are some of the elements kind of beyond the updates to the Columbia Pike Revitalization Plan, the Neighborhoods Area Plan, updates to the General Land Use Plan and the Master Transportation Plan. These are the elements that will help inform this updated vision for Barcroft. So for example, it could include conservation area limits and potential mitigation strategies. Again, more kind of information on building height within redevelopment areas and the nature of those transitions to preserved buildings, the overall parking strategy, characteristics of the bike and pedestrian facilities and network, the resident amenity center location and vision, which the applicant will share more information about tonight, lighting goals for private streets, parking areas, and preserved buildings throughout the site, the general location size and configuration of those open spaces and public parks, and then our goals for private open space, targets for site-wide tree canopy, the concept for the biophilic network, and an updated phasing plan. So in response to some of the general feedback, we do have some specific guidance that, again, will be incorporated into the Master Financing Development Plan. So a couple of these that we wanted to share with you this evening is just a response to questions about the parking supply. As we're continuing to review some of these renovation use permits, the applicant is proposing to retain the existing parking spaces. And the goal for the preserved areas throughout the site is to retain that existing parking ratio of 1 space per unit. And then where redevelopment will occur, all of the parking will be accommodated within those areas and will meet the standards that currently exist in the form-based code. And again, we've reviewed this slide before. We do have tree canopy targets for different portions of the site. So those change whether we're looking at new development, programmed mini parks, some of those historic preservation areas, and the natural areas. But these are some of the targets that, again, we'll be incorporating into the MFDP to kind of structure the vision as redevelopment and preservation continues to occur on the site. And then we also heard a lot about the desire for biophilic design, both enhancing what exists there today, but also creating kind of new opportunities. We have continued to review renovation use permits with this lens to enhance some of those existing assets and courtyards. And then the 2023 MFDP proposal did identify South Thomas Street as a primary pedestrian connection through the site, but we do see a kind of a gap in a meaningful east-west connection for pedestrians. So Gyre Lynch is exploring a corresponding east-west connection to help complete this network, and are looking at opportunities to transform this into a biophilic network with improved, consistent design throughout that would help get people east-west through the property. So we will be relying on, both some of the, existing assets on the site, but also where we can rely on guidance from the 2019 Biophilic City Resolution adopted by the County Board to guide this vision. The other piece of feedback that we heard quite a bit about throughout this process was the need for children's playgrounds throughout the site. So we have identified several different opportunities in and around the Barcroft apartment site to address some of these this need for these playground amenities. So the first one is within Doctors Run Park. We have the county has already identified funding for the design and construction of a new playground, as well as updates to the volleyball courts, the picnic shelter, circulation, and site furnishings throughout the site. So that work we expect design to begin later this fall, and the community will be engaged in that process. So that's one update that will be coming forward to help address that need. And then some of the other opportunities are some of the site-wide kind of landscape improvements within the preserved areas, those private courtyards, as well as the resident amenity centers, another opportunity for potential playgrounds, as well as any public park planning efforts that occur within the planned mini parks that are adjacent to some of these redevelopment areas on the site. So I'll end here on the planning principles. I think towards the end of the meeting, we're going to circle back to each of these principles just to ensure that they do capture the principles for each of these topic areas that we've covered over these last couple months. We did add an intro statement, which I think we provided in an email over the weekend, that just emphasizes that these principles are in addition to all of the commitments to affordability that the county and that JAR Lynch has already made. So we'll pull this slide up again at the end to review and have receive any feedback on any changes needed to these principles, but these will live in the Master Financing and Development Plan document. So quickly, I'll cover a remaining schedule. Between now and the first envisioned meeting with commissions, we as staff will be working to address feedback that we received from this final working group meeting. Again, developing that update to the MFDP and capturing all of the analysis that happened as part of this process. Finalizing those policy updates that we reviewed to those 4 policy documents, and then again looking at some of the schedules that we can anticipate moving into the fall. So a quick snapshot of all of the commissions that we anticipate visiting within the next month. The Long Range Planning Committee, the regular Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group, the Historical Affairs and Landmark Review Board, Parks and Recreation Commission, Transportation Commission, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, and then ending with the Planning Commission and the Housing Commission before the county board meeting in July. And these are the 3 actions, county board actions, that we will bringing forward for their consideration. The first will be for them to consider approving the JAR Lynch Master Financing and Development Plan, and then again adopting those addendums to the 2012 Neighborhoods Area Plan and the 2005 Revitalization Plan. And then we'll also be asking them to authorize advertisement of amendments to the General Land Use Plan and the Master Transportation Plan, which we'll plan to bring back to the board for final consideration later in 2024. So for this next phase of analysis, we do anticipate the JAR Lynch team formally submitting their first redevelopment application or first application for new construction. So we'll be reviewing that application through the summer and the fall. And then once that item is ready for county board review, we anticipate taking it for review to a number of different commissions. Also during that time, we will be making draft updates to the both of the form-based code documents if necessary, to capture the updated vision in the Neighborhoods Area Plan and the Revitalization Plan. So then in the winter of 2024, 2025, we'll be bringing the GLUP and the MTP amendments, which we're planning to advertise in July to the board, as well as any of those amendments proposed to each of the form-based codes, and that first new construction application for Barcroft. Also in the second half of the year, we'll be doing a separate analysis of Doctors Run, which you can see here in the photo in yellow. Runs across 16th Street, and it does travel up South George Mason Drive into the Doctors Branch Park over there. And here are a couple of other views of Doctors Run. So after this July update, again, we'll be investigating further the conditions of the stream, any kind of capacity analysis that needs to be done in this watershed area in the southern portion of the site. So there will be some robust modeling that occurs to capture some of the current capacity and any kind of flood risk data, which is at this point about 40 years old. So it is due for an updated analysis. And then any findings from this analysis we'll have to revisit in the second half of the year if it warrants any updates to the Master Financing and Development Plan. All right, I am done for now, and I think the applicant has a presentation.
Thank you, Olivia. That was very thorough and I think very necessary to talk about kind of where we've been, county policies, where we're headed. I'm going to focus more directly on where we've been and where we are in terms of the items that we have discussed at our various working group meetings. So my name is Kathy Puskar with Walsh Colucci, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. So we started, as you all may remember, with our partee. I'm not sure who's running our partee that showed kind of the east node at George Mason Place and the west node at Wakefield Place, with kind of the coming together of the neighborhood at Barcroft Crossing, where we would like to have the amenity center. And those are kind of the three areas that we focused on relative to the nodes that we were going to be building this development around. And one of the topics we talked about was open space. And looking at the open space, let's start at the east node, which is that George Mason Place. And this is the open space that we shared with you all, our proposal to have 0.7 acres in a mini park along South George Mason Drive. We did get feedback on that proposal that while it was 0.7 acres, it did not appear to account for private outdoor dining areas that might be associated with the proposed retail in that area. There was also a concern, whereas we thought kind of moving the mini park to the outside at George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike would play off of the Centro Plaza and Doctors Run Park. There was a clear desire by both residents at Barcroft and I think members of this working group who said, no, that public space should really serve the residents of Barcroft, and it should be more centrally located. And once again, should be a different geometry that was wider and better able to be used. So our updated proposal puts that mini park back into the fabric. This is in a location that is similar to where it was shown in the original plan. You'll also see that we added 0.3 acres of a mini park at the intersection of South George Mason Drive and Columbia Pike on the Penske site. So that property will be folded into Barcroft because it is part of the MFDP. And so we're showing a 0.3 acre mini park there, and then 0.45 acres in a central location on the property. So the total of that is 0.75 acres. And as we develop that mini park, we can certainly look at ways, there were suggestions to create a design element that perhaps screens the adjacent alley, and that could pick up on some of the arched features of Building 40 that will be demolished. Looking at the west node, once again, oh, I'm sorry. And here's our comparison, just so that you all can see it easily, of kind of where we were and where we are now. So we hope that's responsive to the concerns and comments that were made at our working group meeting. Now let's go to the west node. On the west node, once again, we had a park that was kind of oriented towards 4 Mile Run. That park was 0.3 acres, and it was terraced due to topography in that location. And we thought it could include a public green, perhaps a playground. And I think there was concern about that building in terms of the size of it, in terms of the proximity to the new building, such that it may appear to be more of an open space that serves that building rather than the broader community. And once again, there was a discussion about programming opportunities and how the terracing of that space may impact our ability to utilize it for the larger neighborhood. So we took a look at that and went back, and here's our current thinking. Once again, moving that mini park into the development, into the community. You can see an existing building flanking that, as well as a new building. And then also that extension of 12th Street, right, which we're going to be bringing off of South George Mason Drive through South Thomas Street over towards 4 Mile Run. So that is a stronger connection, we think, to historic Barcroft. And we will still have some grade change here. So we will be looking at opportunities on how do we maximize utilization and opportunities in that space, given the grade that we know exists on the property. We've increased the size of the park is now 0.55 acres. I think I told you previously it was 0.3. And so it's a larger park. It's a more, a better shape, and we believe in a better location to really serve the residents of Barcroft. The third part of open space we talked about were the preserved natural areas. And I think we showed this exhibit where we talked about the fact that there was an area that was 0.37 acres that had a slope failure. And it was shown in the original form-based code to be preserved, but of course, no longer exists. And then we also highlighted other natural preserved areas. So we talked a lot about those areas and how it would be an opportunity for us to have biophilic elements for people to connect with nature. And we talked about looking at that slope stabilization area to see, would it be possible to add plantings to that area? We were working with our engineers, and there was some concern that we might not be able to do anything in that area just to maintain the stability of the slope stabilization. And then there was also the idea of how do we supplement and preserve and provide additional preserved areas. So we've been looking at this pretty carefully, and hopefully you'll be pleased to see that we have increased our preserve areas. And most significantly, if you look at the 0.52 acres, that's the original slope failure area. And then another area that was not identified on the original form-based code as being a natural preserved area, but we have kind of brought it into the fold to also serve as a natural preserved area, which kind of creates that ribbon of preserved natural area, which I think is ideal for creating that biophilic environment for our existing and new residents to enjoy. And then you'll also see a couple of opportunities with other dark green spaces in the middle of the property where we're going to create some new areas for natural areas to be enjoyed for the community. And so then we talked about biophilic connections. And in those biophilic connections, kind of how can we improve those biophilic connections throughout Barcroft? You know, you all are familiar with that area. There are sidewalks that have biophilic elements to them, but we also have natural areas and natural design line paths that have can benefit from additional improvements from a biophilic perspective. We talked about improving courtyards, and as we come in with these renovations to various courtyards, we're looking at ways to add trees and plantings to those courtyards. We talked about enhancing connections, both the kind of natural connections that occur from pedestrians as well as those that we plan with sidewalks to allow a connection with nature. We talked about maintaining and preserving those natural areas. And then we also talked about enhancing pathways, low-level lighting, wayfinding to make it easier for our residents to traverse through the community from one point to another. Next. And so here are the biophilic connections that we have enhanced and added to make sure that we have some clear proposed biophilic paths through the community. And as I mentioned, there'll also be additional treatment of existing courtyards and areas where we already have sidewalks. You know, Barcroft's a pretty special place in the amount of open space that it has, especially in those areas to be preserved. So we have a lot of opportunity to enhance the biophilic elements of Barcroft. Next. We also talked about the conservation area. And if you'll remember our first working group, we talked about the conservation area. We kind of pushed it down a little bit because the conservation area is related to the other features that we've talked about, like open space areas and pathways and streets. And so here's where we are today. The conservation area has remained the same. However, you'll see an asterisk on the amenity center block at the intersection of 12th Street and South Thomas. And we added that asterisk because we are removing that area. It says conversation area, but I think we meant to say conservation area removed to accommodate the resident amenity center. And we say limits of demolition to be determined. So on the other areas where you see the black striping, we are removing those buildings in totality from the conservation area, and they will be demolished to allow for new development. With the amenity center, we actually plan to preserve 6 units in that building to allow us to have a sight line to some of the historic fabric as you come in South Thomas Street off of Columbia Pike. And then we will have our amenity center. And so the exact kind of limit of how much of that building will be demolished will be determined when we design and come in with the new amenity center. But also recall that in exchange for the areas that we have proposed to take out of the conservation area, we are putting some buildings back in the conservation area. We found it to be really important to once again frame that historic Barcroft gateway. You saw that in our Part T as you come in that main entrance, to have those existing buildings remain, I think will really create that historic gateway and pathway as you come down South Thomas Street. Next. In terms of that amenity center and what will be in the amenity center and also kind of on that property, we did speak with the residents. I know we got feedback from this group, but we also went directly to our residents who live there today to say, what do you need? What would you like? And you'll see here a list of indoor amenities that might be possible and outdoor amenities. And so as we develop that amenity center, we will be engaging with the community, with the residents, to make sure that our programming of that space addresses their desires. We are thinking about a building that's probably going to be somewhere in the rounds of 10 to 15,000 square feet, and will probably be 1 to 2 stories. And that will serve the residents who are in the existing buildings and in the new affordable housing buildings. The new buildings, the new construction buildings that are not dedicated affordable housing, LIHTC buildings, will have their own open spaces within their buildings, like we have done for other buildings up and down the pike. And so we will have multi-purpose rooms, fitness center, outdoor amenities, leasing areas in that new facility, but once again, with additional public input. In terms of transportation, I think we talked about cars, bikes, and peds. So we're going to talk about cars first. Once again, this new street network, you'll see in the blue hatching where we're talking about new vehicular connections. So we're really trying to strengthen that 12th Street connection all the way from east of South George Mason Drive over through Thomas Street and over to Wakefield so that you can get down to 4 Mile Run. We've also strengthened the network coming off of Columbia Pike by creating the connection of existing Taylor Street with the new road connection to 12th. And that will allow us to disperse traffic in a grid pattern where people who live in Barcroft can choose to come in and out at Taylor Street without having to get on South George Mason Drive. Next. And we talked about our bikes, and you'll see the bike network here. And of course, as we talk about the streets and the bikes, the exact design of those street cross sections, the exact design of those bike facilities will occur as part of the ongoing work that Olivia mentioned we will be doing with the county. Right now, we're kind of at that 10,000 foot level, and we'll be digging into more details, but suffice it to say, our bike connection will continue through along that 12th Street that we've created, and also give us an ability we heard was important to get from South 4 Mile Run up Wakefield through Columbia Pike to the other side of Columbia Pike to connect that facility. In terms of urban design, we looked at we had a conversation with you all about height and taking advantage of topography. We talked about marrying kind of the west node that previously was part of the commercial code, and we're proposing to make part of the neighborhoods code. And the idea that the commercial code came first, and so The existing commercial code has lower heights in that corner of Columbia Pike and 4 Mile Run because it anticipated those buildings being next to the existing fabric of Barcroft. Of course, when the neighborhoods code came in, now we're looking at taller buildings in that area of the neighborhoods code in Barcroft. And so we're going to marry up those two pieces to allow us to take advantage of the tallest height and density in the areas where they will have the least impact on adjacent neighbors. And so this is part of the financing plan of the whole development to allow us to build these new buildings where we can get new market rate and some affordable units to make up for the units that we are taking down. So remember, we were replacing all of the affordable units on site today to maintain the same number of affordable units that exist in Barcroft. If you look at that east node, you'll see some areas that are 6 stories along George Mason Drive, 8 stories. And a lot of that has to do with the topography, where if you're looking at the building, some of you who've been involved in the form-based code projects before, you could look at the building on one side and it looks like it's 6 stories, and then you turn the corner and it looks like it's 8 stories because of the topography. So we've tried to look at the topography and put a height range, once again, in the areas that can take it with the neighboring uses. And then you'll also see the areas where we taper down to 3 stories, where we are in close proximity to that existing Barcroft fabric. In other words, we're not across the street. We're not a certain distance away from those buildings. And so we've made it clear in our proposed plan that we'll be stepping down to those adjacent buildings. You'll note that the blocks have changed a little bit in this plan due to the change in the locations of the open space. So this plan is slightly different than you saw before, although the heights are the same, the size and shape of the blocks that will be the new development blocks are a little bit different. Next. So what does that vision? Remember, we started with the Part T at the beginning. And so now with all of the changes that we've made, here is that updated Part T, right? Still taking advantage of that historic Barcroft gateway, making changes to the open space and moving those open spaces closer into the property, and also connecting that 12th Street across the street to the Penske site, adding open space at Penske, and then all the other improvements that we've walked through. We really look forward to moving forward with our first phase renovations that have been approved and going into the county board for more approvals for those renovations, to hopefully make better units for the residents that are there today so that they can move into them and stay in them on site, as we then move forward with new development blocks in accordance with this plan, new open spaces, improved streets, improved sidewalks, improved bike facilities, improved biophilic environment. And we hope that you all, and thank you all who have been part of this working group. We've worked hard. We've had a lot of meetings. It's been quite a commitment of time on everyone's part. And I hope you all can see that the changes and the improvements that we've made as a result of your input and the conversations that we've had in these meetings. Next. I think that's the end of our presentation, Olivia.
Commissioner Weir, your sound isn't working.
Thank you. What you missed was me thanking both of you very much for your presentations and inviting those assembled with clarifying questions to raise them. It is 7:50, and remember, I want to get to that general discussion at 8:15. So please be as efficient as possible. Ms. Van Hine.
Hi, I'm Pam Van Hine. I am the recording secretary for the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. And I am substituting for Mike Hanna, who is with the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and he could not attend tonight. I have a short question on the staff slide about parking supply and a couple questions about the applicant slide on the biophilic connections. Can I cover both or just one?
But as long as they are clarifying questions, if they're more
clarifying
substantive, we'll
questions.
get back to you. Yep.
I'll try to be very fast. For the parking supply, which was slide 20, I noticed that the market rate was 1.125 for the new buildings. The affordable rate was 0.825, and in the existing ones, it's one space. Why are the affordable units in the new buildings less than everything else, and why are the market rate more? I would think that the market rate would be less. And should I ask my other questions, or should we answer that one first?
Why don't you put them both on the table, and then we'll let
Okay.
the applicant or staff pick them up as they
Okay,
choose.
thank you very much. For the biophilic connections, which was slide 14, will this also be accessible for bikes? And do you know how wide the path will be and whether it will be fully accessible? And it looks like there's a lot of slopes as you're approaching the other main roads. And are those currently stairs, and will you create paths? And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that those are best put to the applicant. Ms. Sontag, let me know if you
So
disagree. Or Ms. Puskar.
I was just going to say, for the parking, those are the current requirements in the form-based code that apply to every project in the neighborhood's form-based code. And the county has done research and studies that show that actually for the affordable units, they have lower parking ratios in general. So those ratios are just straight out of the form-based code. I don't know, Olivia.
Yep. Thanks, Kathy. And then for the preserved units on site, a lot of that is just backed by feedback from residents and some of the Jar Lynch's team's study of the site. So they're just trying to reflect some of those express parking needs.
And then as to the question on the paths, I don't know the width of those paths yet. They're not fully designed. They are not intended for bicycles. They're intended for pedestrians. And to your point, there is a lot of topography on this site. And so not every pathway can be accessible, unfortunately, because of the existing conditions on the site and the fact that those buildings are staying in place as they currently exist today.
We'll go to Mr. Cole.
Thank you. Parking, before we move off of that. I understand that the form-based code has parking allocations in it. Totally understand that. What I'm trying to understand is, well, first, quick question, Mark. We heard from both the residents and the other people that responded to the survey, parking is a big issue. So my question is this: in terms of if there are 1,300 and something units in Barcroft currently, and are going to be maintained as affordable units going forward, does that mean if that ratio was 1-to-1 for the existing buildings, with taking out some of the existing buildings and replacing them with other buildings, which are going to be at 0.8 parking spaces per unit, are we going to maintain at least the same number of parking spaces for the affordable units pre and post development?
Yes, that's what the applicant is proposing, even with the removed, so whatever preserved remaining units there are, those will still maintain that 1-to-1 ratio. And I see Mr. Gibson has his hand up and might be able to explain a little bit further about some of the study we've been doing on those, the parking supply and parking ratios for the site.
And thank you for the question. Just to clarify, I think what you're asking is across the units that are new and preserved, if a 1-to-1 ratio would be achieved. And the answer would be no. It would be 0.85 for the new units that are put into the new buildings and 1-to-1 for the existing units to remain.
So there will be a reduction in parking for the affordable units. Because right now it's 1-to-1, and you're going to be demolishing some of those units and I'm replacing them with new, which is a lower multiple.
Yes, I mean, I think when you do the math that way, it'd be a reduction in numbers, but it's maintaining all existing parking supply for existing residents generally in the configuration that they're used to today. And then if they move into a new multifamily building, they'd have all the benefits of multifamily garage, but the parking ratio would be 0.85, consistent with the existing code.
I understand. My point is parking is a big issue. It's been expressed by everybody. I see a net reduction in parking as a result. So thank you.
I'm going to go. Thank you, Mr. Cole. I'm going to go to Ms. Lawrence, and then Ms. Dye, if you have something, I'm going to go to you after.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a clarification on the historic Barcroft Gateway. I know the last meeting there was some discussion about the arch, retaining the arch or not, and I just wanted to clarify whether buildings are actually going to be preserved rather than demolished in that area, and if the arch will be preserved. Thank you.
I can start things off, and then the applicant can bring up their plan again. But at this time, they're not proposing to preserve that building with the arches. It's shown for redevelopment, and part of the reason for that is that's a critical connection from Columbia Pike to 12th Street. That Taylor Street connection is pretty critical, and it runs right through where those arches exist today.
And if you could pull up the exhibit, I don't know who's driving on our side, but if you could pull up the plan, the conservation plan. So when we talk about the historic Barcroft Gateway, we're talking about coming up on South Thomas Street into the property. So that existing entryway there. So we are keeping buildings that frame that street that were previously going to be demolished. And then for building 40, which is what I think you're talking about with the existing building, a portion of that building was already outside of the conservation area. And we are now demolishing that entire building. But I think you need to go to the other, we need to show where the streets and the open space are in the new plan. Because we are connecting Taylor Street, which would be going through that building. And then we're providing an open space at that intersection. So for the street grid and for the open space and for other kind of looking at the development blocks and where we can get the yield we need to meet the requirements of the financing plan, this is where we landed.
Just another quick, is there any plan to replace any aspect of that arch anywhere?
We had thought about, as we move forward with designing this open space, that we can look at ways to kind of interpret that arch, perhaps, mimic the arch or have some reference to those features that are in the buildings that will be demolished.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions before open the floor to any more substantive questions or points? And bear in mind, we're going to go through, I'm going to call on each group, so everyone will get a chance to weigh in.
Linda Dye.
Oh, Ms. Dye, I said I was going to go to you. Thank you. Sorry.
Linda Dye, representing Douglas Park. Back to parking. I have a question about the current parking policy for Barcroft Apartments. Do you allow folks who own taxis, which also function as their personal vehicles, or people who own commercial vans and pickups because they run a small business? Do you allow those vehicles with commercial markings currently in the parking areas on the property? And then in terms of the new parking structures, would they physically be able to accommodate if folks own pickups? And I'm not talking about, really large double axle type pickups, but some of the smaller pickups. Would the new parking structures actually be able to accommodate physically vans and pickups that people may own because they own small businesses? So those are the two questions. Thank you.
I'm going to have to rely on David, Hildy, or Greg. You guys are more familiar with the current operation and kind of the new construction.
I mean, I think the first part of that was if the currently there are commercial vehicles allowed to be parked on site, and yeah, if they're a resident of Barcroft and they have parking permit, we don't restrict that. And I think the second part is with the garage heights. I can't answer that definitively. I do typically with these buildings, at least the first level does have a higher floor height with the accessible parking, but that is something we can follow up on.
Okay, that would be really helpful, I think, since quite a number of folks, not just in Barcroft Apartments, but throughout South Arlington, do run small commercial businesses. And so, you know, they're not just driving sedans, which you're trying to park into parking structures. So just if we could possibly accommodate as many folks as possible in very practical terms, that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Dahlhut.
Hi, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I just had a quick clarifying question about the lighting plan. I saw in the community comments that there were questions about light or concerned about lighting. Is someone looking at the lighting plan for the entire site, or is it going to be, this is probably a question for staff, I guess, or is it going to be like piece by piece? Just sort of curious about how that, like who's looking at that as we go?
So typically we would address that piece by piece, but we are looking at including some guidance in the MFDP just to address, you know, how we would take a look at that in different portions of the site.
Yeah, and I'll just add as we are, you know, Gyra Lynch is has studied as a whole. That was one of our early due diligence items. We did a site-wide lighting study, so we know where the gaps are, and then we're trying to implement that in the renovation phases as we go. And as Kathy mentioned, for some of the path lighting and other things, we are looking at that holistically.
I'm going to come in response on this, just exercising chair's privilege, and then Mr. Harada, I'll go to you next. Thank you. A concern that weighs heavily for me is the extent to which a lot of the private streets that will be functioning very much as streets with parking, but as streets, but won't be on the master transportation plan. I have a lot of anxiety over how those stay updated to spec over the decades. It is very easy for the county when there's a change to the master transportation plan and a street gets rebuilt, or there's some development 20 or 30 years down the road. It's very easy for the county to point to the master transportation plan and say, this is what a cross section looks like, this is what a lighting standard looks like, this is how many lumens per square feet, or whatever the metric is that that we use to say this is what a safely lit environment looks like, this is what their goals are. And what for these private streets that aren't going to be on the MTP, to the extent that we are memorializing what the standards are today, and I am confident that we are, and I am confident that they are good, that it will be in 2024 something that looks like what a very great street should look like. We are sort of freezing those in amber when we aren't saying the MTP is going to govern for this street. And so, in 10 years, when this is a deliberately ridiculous example, but in 10 years, when we find out that the Carlisle lights give us all cancer and we fix the MTP to change the lighting standard for the easement to the side of a cross section to not be the Carlisle light anymore, that change isn't going to get made in the MFDP. I don't want to have to rely on people's memories or on the good graces of some potential hypothetical future owner to make sure that these kinds of standards are kept evolving, for the private streets on the site. So that's a higher level concern. I don't know that I need a response right now, especially because I want to go to Mr. Harada first, and then if staff or the applicant want to speak to that in response to Mr. Harada's question as well, I would be happy to hear it there. But for now, it's just also good to take it under advisement. Mr. Harada, you're up.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak up. And I want to thank you guys for what you've been doing so far. We have more lighting now, and we have the marking spaces for our residents marked better. So the towing company won't tow vehicles that are not on marked zones, and that's great. And someone mentioned about the commercial vehicles. I run a small business myself. So I have one company car that has logo, and the other one is just a regular vehicle, my personal vehicle. And is there a possibility that you notify the towing company that you guys are allowed to have commercial cars, or at least if they're residents, they have to be registered in the complex that we live here, so they won't, challenge them to tow their work cars like taxis or limo cars or maybe pickup trucks that they have their logo with their business, because that's their daily, survival bottom bread for their family. Not everybody can afford 2 or 3 cars to just go on the weekend on a family car, but you might have a taxi and a small SUV or something like that for the family and kids. That'd be great that the towing company should be notified that they are allowing us and we can safely park on the street on South Thomas per se. And then if we have our parking spot assigned, we can park sometimes our work car and they just leave on the street the other vehicle that we might have, or a visitor or something like that. So they will be safe in this our community. Notify them so we can have peace in mind. And obviously the lighting is a big issue, because I've been noticed over the past few nights, past 3 weeks, that there are vehicles they drive by South Thomas, since they are not on South Thomas Street from Columbia Pike all the way to 4 Mile Run. No bumps or stops, because there are school buses stopping for kids, but cars they're just going across like a racing car, like it's a 495. And it's kind of a little bit urgent, I would say, that I observed that they should be notified that put a bumper or two somewhere for safety for the kids when they leaving in the morning to go to school, or when they're coming back. Because I see cars they're just using as a pathway to cross around from Columbia Pike to get to the other side because of the traffic, and that could prevent some, incidents and some cars being bumped. I see carpool vehicles they've been hidden by other cars that we don't know who they are. And I've been spending time calling the chief of police in Arlington. They don't call back, and they don't report anymore any incident. Nobody sends over here to see. We're gonna put a camera or like one of those luminaries with the lights. They stream the lights of police around it. We don't know how many people come around every day that we don't know. Nobody's watching that, but I'm noticing that there are strange people walking around our neighborhood, and there's no security here except myself that I concern because of where I live, and every single thing that we do is our investment. Our work trucks are investments, put a new light, new tires. That's an investment. Somebody's last your tire is $200, $300 these days, and you have to put out of your pocket if somebody stab your tire or hit your work truck. It's like wow, an extra buck, and nobody's seeing anything. The police doesn't even show up anymore. If we have to do online, COVID is over. They should allow to come by and say, you know what, we're gonna start sending one officer once a week, to do reports and see what's going on in the neighborhood. But they don't even care. I don't know if you change the chief of police that does somebody else better job than the one that we have right now, the current one that is just sitting on his desk. And he doesn't even care what's going on in this neighborhood. Like I care, because I live here 4 years so far, and we could do a lot of improvement, putting some police around here too. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harada. I am going to invite anyone else who has anything to ask or comment at this point to speak up, and then I'm going to after that sort of solicit any final thoughts or comments from the different stakeholder groups, and I will call on you, but you don't have to answer in any particular. You don't have to speak, but I will sort of let people know once they've been speaking for about um, 90 seconds, and at the same time, I'll try to, if someone's not available to speak right away, I'll try to come back to you as well. So the first person, the first stakeholder group on my list is Planning Commission. Commissioner Berkey, are you there? We'll come and I'll come back if not. Commissioner Berkey. I saw you go off mute on your mic on Teams. Your microphone might be muted. We will come back to Commissioner Berkey. Is someone here from the Housing Commission? Transportation Commission? Ms. Van Hine, back to you from, well, if I remember right, if you're not here for, I believe you're here for pedestrian advisory and bicycle advisory. We'll go to you.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. I'll try to be super fast. Okay. First point, and I've got like 6 points, unfortunately. We would love to have somebody from your group present to the backpack on Monday, June 3rd at 7 p.m., sometime between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. I don't know if that's possible. In your earlier slides, you did say committees and commissions you'd be going to in June, and we are having a joint meeting, and we would very much like to have you there. So something to think about, and I hope you can do that. Second point, and again, Mike and I have both brought up these points. We're very concerned about the connection between Doctors Run Park and 12th Street Boulevard and the Barcroft property. And several people have recommended using 13th Street, certainly as a temporary solution. I support that. The problem with that is then you have to figure out what to do with Taylor Street, because right now it's very hard to get through all the parked vehicles. Our third point, 4 Mile Run Minor. The sidewalks need to be wider. You need accessible paths to connect to the WNOD trail. You need bike access at some point, and Chris has suggested comments for that. We are concerned about the Wakefield corner. Bike ped access is a problem. One of my points is for everybody who lives in new buildings, old buildings that are close to one of the 3 main streets, you have to have access from those buildings to those streets. That has got to be a primary access. It doesn't have to be the lobby, but people are not going to go up and down Thomas. So please do that. I am concerned about parking as well. I'm just amazed at all the parking there, and clearly people who live there now need their vehicles. And there, I did not see any PUDO now, but I think once you have market rate apartments, you're going to need PUDO. So plan for that as well. And those are all my comments. And we really hope that you can come on Monday, June 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here from Disability Advisory Commission?
Hi, it's Karen O'Donnell. Thanks for the opportunity to represent the interest of Arlingtonians, and really welcome all of your efforts to ensure that the paths, the biophilic spaces, and the mini parks are accessible. We understand the challenges of some of the topography. Also want to continue to hear about the actual specifications of the ADA compliant units, and then Gerald Lynch's plans to ensure that they incorporate universal design through all of the units. And we also would like to invite you to attend the June meeting of the Disability Advisory Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hodant. I'm going to call on Parks and Rec, and then I am told that Commissioner Berkey may be with us, and so I'll go back to him after Parks and Rec. Commissioner Dimter.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Nelson from the Park and Recreation Commission. I just want to say thank you to both county staff and the applicant team. I think that a lot of this really incorporated the feedback as it relates to parks and open space and tree canopy and all of these other aspects of nature really well. Great to see those mini parks get moved, reconfigured, enlarged to meet a lot of the recommendations that this working group made. And I think beyond those official parks, just the redoing of a lot of the courtyards, and those improvements will really be nice and will maintain the garden apartment values that are very central to Barcroft. And I'm just really happy to see where the vision had changed and how it was shaped and how everyone was able to contribute to that. So looking forward to how this continues to evolve and give input, and I'm looking forward to hearing it at our Park and Recreation meeting in June. But just wanted to say thanks to everyone, and really happy with how this turned out so far.
Thank you very much. Going to go back to Commissioner Berkey for Planning Commission, and then next on deck will be Forestry and Natural Resources.
Great. Can you hear me, Daniel?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. Sorry, everybody, doing triple duty tonight, so I'm calling in by phone. Yeah, I concur with my colleagues in my appreciation to the applicant team and to county staff, especially the applicant team. It's just wonderful to work with folks who are really earnestly trying to incorporate feedback and listen. And I think that that's been displayed here. So I'm very happy from a public process standpoint. You know, substantively, folks have mentioned the park relocation and some of those modifications. And I concur wholeheartedly that I think that, and especially parking, have been prioritized per, you know, what we've largely heard from residents. And so I think this really balances those current needs and desires and uses with having an eye towards the future. I think I remain a little bit concerned about some of the street grid connections, thinking about our 12th Road connection and, you know, the bike boulevard, as well as the lighting issues that folks have brought up. But I don't think that that's anything that can't be kind of raised and fleshed out further, either in this process or down the road. So again, just really appreciate everybody's work and excited for the path forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Berkey. We are going to, I believe I said Forestry and Natural Resources, and HAA LRB will be on deck.
Okay, thanks, David Howell here. So we've talked about in different parts of the evening, parking issue and lighting, biophilic network, biophilic design. I just want to pick up a little bit more on a few of those things to carry into the approval phase and then into the individual project phases. And one, and particularly related to lighting, is that in the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, there is a section discussing the International Dark Sky Standards and the importance of moderating lighting both in direction and also in temperature. And by temperature, I mean on the spectrum. So we're talking about blue light, which is pretty damaging in a number of ways, down to the yellows and the lower frequencies. These standards have been around for quite a long time, and they're now being adopted by many jurisdictions. It turns out that with LEDs, of course, that this is a matter of safety and security, and also animal friendly, and also kid friendly, and also adult friendly, and also energy friendly. So I would really encourage, we've had some discussion about what's on the transportation plan and what's private, and you know what we're talking about in terms of building lighting and general lighting, that there be a holistic view about maybe how to kind of almost start over with the concept of what is safe and secure lighting, what's necessary, in what direction, in what intensity, because the views of that professionally now in the industry are quite different from even 15 years ago. And the county has wrestled with it a bit in terms of recreational lighting in parks, but we're not where we need to be on that. So this would be a
Mr.
great
Howell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to encourage you to move things along so that we can get through the rest of the list.
Okay, one more quick point, and that is that the garden department idea has historically been and evolved from tree canopy and grassy courtyards. But in the biophilic context, we can also really emphasize understory trees, shrubs, grasses, and other things as a way of doing placemaking, as a way of privatizing areas, as a way of helping with erosion, and all of these, of course, helping with heat island impact, which will in the next 20 years be one of the most serious effects of climate change. So I'm just encouraging, it's not just about canopy trees. We all love them and we want to keep them. I have to say that, of course, and I believe it anyway. But we know there'll be a few places where those will have to go. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing else left to do. And there are plenty of native species of understory trees in the 15 to 20, 30 year range that can do an awful lot of good in a lot of places. So just have a very broad native landscaping perspective when that gets started. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. Going to HARLB. Next on deck will be Barcroft Resident Council.
Oops. Can you hear me? I'm not sure why I'm not showing up. Okay. My camera does not seem to be working. So anyway.
We can hear and see you.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm just not on my screen. Joan Lawrence from the Historic Affairs and Landmark Review Board. First, I want to commend the applicants on deciding to retain the buildings that were set for demolition near Columbia Pike. I think that's a big plus. I also think that the heights and the gradation of heights and the step backs near the historic buildings are I think better than they might have been earlier. The main concern I have is the amenity center, and I know that there are a lot of questions. There's no determination yet about how much demolition is going to be done, but I want to have the applicant consider something, and that is perhaps repurposing part of the building to make those all-purpose rooms and game rooms and fitness center and all the indoor amenities that are possible. Now, granted, if it's decided to build a swimming pool, that makes a little bit more complicated. But I think that if there's any way to preserve as much of those buildings as possible for the indoor amenity centers, not only is it environmentally sound, as you know, to reuse existing materials, but it would minimize the amount of demolition that would need to be done. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing the applicant at the next HLRB meeting in June. I believe they're coming, and hope to discuss this further with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawrence. Next, we're going to go to Barcroft Residents Council, and then NVHA AHC will be on deck. AHS, NVHA AHS will be on deck. Marco, anything else?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. NVHA.
Daniel, this is Alice Hogan. Are you calling on me?
Yes.
From Navajo?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I only at this time I want to echo the gratitude for the amazing amount of work that's been done by so many folks, both on the staff side and of course on the applicant or owner side. Remarkable work, followed up, on the remarkable purchase in the first place. So thank you to everyone for putting your expertise to work to make the best project we can for lots and lots of families. My one question was about the amenities, whether they would be, these mini parks, the amenity center. Then there was some talk about other amenities within new construction, and I'm wondering what the rules will be about which residents can utilize which amenities, or is everything open to everyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. I am going to go. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to go back to both the applicant and staff real briefly to see if there are any responsive points that they feel like they want to hit before we before we conclude. So that might be the time to answer the questions about amenities if they haven't been raised, but also feel encouraged to point to certain slides. Gonna go next to I believe I said Voice and then Arlington Community Foundation. Arlington Community Foundation.
Yes. Hi, this is Brian Meadow King. I'm not going to be on camera, but so just want to thank everyone for letting us be a part of this process. I'm Brian Meadow King. So at the Community Foundation, we are focused on preventing the economic displacement of folks living at 30% of the area median income, so working families and individuals. And just that's about $45K a year for a family of four in Arlington. So it's folks really working to make ends meet. So I want to thank Jair Lynch County staff and so many others that have gotten us to this point. Like Alice just said, the historic purchase to begin with has been a remarkable process. And it's made possible in part by the land use proposals and the proposed density that this working group has reviewed. So thank you all for your contributions in the working group. Just want to elevate one key principle on the slides about a commitment of at least 10% of units affordable at 30% AMI. So under that proposal, that is 134 units. But the language is at least. So that's very important because in May of 2022, Jair Lynch conducted a survey that showed that 255 households already living at Barcroft earn 30% of AMI or less. So 134 is very good, and it could result in a net loss of more than 100 of those households, 30% AMI households. Not displacement of current residents, but just the capacity of the property and affordability at that level. So just want to name that even though this working group is not focused on those affordability commitments, I want to encourage Jair Lynch and county staff and the county board to continue building off of that at least as interest rates improve and the land use plan moves forward. So thanks everyone.
Thank you. Going to go next to the NAACP Housing Committee, followed by Bugata on deck.
Thank you, Commissioner Weir. Wells Harrell for NAACP Arlington Branch. I want to echo what so many others have said already, that the county staff and Jair Lynch deserve so much credit for the work they've done to advance this important project, especially listening to members of the community, not least Barcroft residents. And that's the one comment I want to make here today, is that as design choices get made, as trade-offs get considered, that the needs of the Barcroft residents get special weight. That can help, I think, clarify some of the tension between concerns about density on the one hand, but also on the other, the need to provide for the affordability that so many households of Barcroft will have come to rely on and will need going forward. And I think that also helps us frame the issue of parking, which we've heard about a lot tonight. I mean, I don't love the idea of doubling down on car dependency, but look, like if the residents have come to depend on a 1-to-1 parking ratio, then I think it's incumbent on the county and the applicant to find some creative solutions to provide those, at least in the short term, maybe even in ways in which parking spaces can be reclaimed. But again, the needs of the residents should come first, and I think that's a way to make sure that the project moves forward in an equitable fashion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell. Going to Bugata with Columbia Pike Partnership on deck.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you both, David and Eric, for leading this effort. I also want to extend those thanks to the Jair Lynch team and the county staff and the commissioners that have been present here, and everyone else has taken part in this effort and conversations. I do want to second the concern on parking. I think it's great that, to have this commitment to preserve the affordable units, but there should also be a preservation of parking for those units. Most households, as you've probably heard from, have two working adults or two people in the unit that work different jobs and so are dependent on their vehicles to get to work. One such could be those construction workers that work in different locations, different sites, and so they're heavily depending on that. Not everyone can get around with the public transportation, so that is a need. Working with tenants here in Arlington, I can tell you that is the major issue everywhere, is the lack of parking. And so here, I think that there's an opportunity. I do want to put something out there. An idea is to consider building something. I haven't heard it talk about a parking deck, but that could be an idea to preserve the current ratio and meet the needs of parking. And so I also wanted to second what Ms. Hogan asked about the use of amenities in the other buildings, about if there'll be any rules or restrictions on use. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to Columbia Pike Partnership. On deck is Alcova Heights.
Do you want me to come in, Alcova Heights?
Yes, I was just going to say, let's go to Alcova Heights. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so very much appreciate all the work that's been put into this. I know from the applicant's perspective, sitting through these sessions and hearing all of our idealistic ideas and stuff, that can sometimes be a little overwhelming. Appreciate you doing it and not, bringing us down all the time with the realities of economics and everything else. So appreciate that, and responding to the issues that we've raised. Specifically, I really do like what you've done with the new plan on open space and the mini parks. It's much better than what it was before. So not going to belabor parking, and so I really don't have anything else that's hasn't already been said, but just to thank everybody for the efforts. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Going to Arlington Heights, and on deck is Arlington Mill.
And Daniel, I'm here if we have not lost our moment.
Let's go to you, and then on deck will be Arlington Heights.
Well, we had John Snyder here, and I am grateful for John being here, not so grateful for him for leaving. But nonetheless, we are grateful for all of this, and I repeat so many of the other things that people have said. I think when we think about this from a CPP and a transformational perspective, we've looked at this and we've typed this up in a letter, but making sure that we're really exploiting the opportunity to integrate the overall Barcroft community into the greater community, that there's the connectivity and placemaking that we've all talked about over the last several months, but ensuring that that the generational opportunity that we have is not lost by being too small. And I know that I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people on this call about where these fundings come from, but thinking about connectivity, placemaking, thinking about equity, both from the environmental perspective, when we think about climate deserts, when we think about food deserts, when we think about inclusiveness in terms of digital equity, I think those are the things that maybe are not necessarily have been at the forefront today, but are all things that I encourage all of us to not lose sight of. Similar to Saul, I think that parking, while it comes up in a lot of different ways, I think how do we be as creative as possible when we think about what's it going to take to have this many number of houses? Does off-site parking, a parking deck, community resource parking that could be part of that node that will contribute to the vibrancy of that part of the Pike is something that we would also encourage. And that we also want to strongly encourage, I know that Shushmita was there at the open house, but that we do everything we can to embrace arts and culture as a connector across the very different components of this population, not just at Barcroft, but in this part of the community. So thank you to everyone except for John Snyder.
We'll make sure he gets the message.
Oh.
No, just kidding.
Just kidding.
Thank you, Arlington Heights, to you, and then Arlington Mill on deck. Arlington Heights, we will come back to you. Arlington Mill and Arlington View on deck.
Yeah, this is Maureen Quill. I'm with Arlington Mill, and I'm also on form-based code. I worked on the original form-based code and also the neighborhood plan. I'm really pleased with the demo tonight and the way things are looking. and I'm looking forward to a refreshened Barcroft. Thank you.
Thank you. Arlington View and Barcroft School and Civic League on deck. Arlington View, will come back to you. Barcroft School and Civic League, Columbia Forest is on deck.
Thank you. This is Glenn McCullough for Barcroft School and Civic League. Second and third, the appreciation of all the effort that goes into this. I've been on the other side of these once in a while, and I know how much it takes. So I really appreciate both staff and the whole team, their efforts. I appreciate the changes in the parks. I really think that's a big change and a large improvement on the locations and the kind of configuration of the parks. I think there's still some minor tweaks with the buildings. I know that'll come later on as we develop more detailed plans for the buildings themselves. And not to belabor the parking, I do think my feeling on the parking is that less on policy, more on process. I feel like we don't have a definitive understanding of what the parking is that's there now. We don't have a parking survey. We don't know that it's 1,000 spaces or 800 spaces. And so what the policy requires is still not clear to me how that relates to the number of spaces we actually have currently. So I really feel like there's a lot more detail in the parking analysis that needs to be done. But we're moving, forward well, and I appreciate the conservation area changes. I think keeping that gateway on Columbia Pike is a big deal, and really an improvement too. And look forward to the amenity center and seeing more about how that's going to work. So thank you.
Thank you. Columbia Forest, followed by Columbia Heights.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, it's Catherine Guernsey here for Columbia Forest and also representing Columbia Forest on the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group. I just want to echo the deep appreciation expressed by others for this robust, open, informative, transparent, and informative process from staff, applicants, and all of the folks involved. It's been really appreciated. Looking forward to seeing these plans as they become more specific over time. I also hope that we on the org will not lose track of some of the issues that have arisen during the conversations regarding areas where perhaps the form-based code may have had some unintended consequences. And I have in particular in mind the discussions around where some of the references to density in the form-based code as it's currently written may have had some unintended consequences or impacts with respect to accessible units and things like that. So look forward to revisiting some of those issues that have arisen during the course of these discussions, and of course look forward to seeing how this all develops in Barcroft. So thank you again. Over.
Thank you. Going to Douglas Park and Foxcroft Heights is on deck. And that's
Hi,
Ms. Dye,
everyone.
right?
Oh,
Linda Dye from Douglas Park.
okay.
Barcroft Apartments is and has historically and today and hopefully in the future will continue to be a huge asset for Arlington, South Arlington, and is part of the Douglas Park Civic Association. I personally lived at Barcroft Apartments after college for 4 years, so I've always had a personal interest in the welfare of the entire complex and everyone who lives there. So I really appreciate, and this is an incredible amount of effort on the part of Jair Lynch and the county staff to do all of this work in literally a matter of weeks. It's extremely impressive, and to see the responsiveness to well-articulated concerns and to see specific responses, including today with moving the mini parks. So I really, really appreciate the effort that's gone into this in such a short period of time, and look forward to Barcroft Apartments continuing to be a huge asset for Arlington as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dye. Do we have anyone from Foxcroft Heights? And then Penrose will be on deck. Anyone from Penrose?
Hi, Daniel. This is Michelle from
Hi.
Penrose.
Great.
I just want to echo everyone the staff especially, and the team at Gyro Lunch for all the work they've done. I just want to echo everything that everyone else has said. The devil's in the details sometimes, and so I look forward to some of the reviews that are going to come through the form-based code. I have a particular care, I guess, about a lot of the playgrounds, and like to see a variation in the playgrounds, not just hot lots, but playgrounds for all the kids that aren't just hot plastic in the sun. And so I look forward to talking about those details a little bit more in the future, and the lighting and accessibility. But thank you, everyone, for all that. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. I am reminded that on my checklist, I inadvertently checked both Columbia Forest and Columbia Heights. So we will come back to Columbia Heights before I call on the groups that we've missed. Columbia Heights. Ed. Okay, going back. Housing Commission. Transportation. Voice. Arlington Heights. Arlington View. Foxcroft Heights. Columbia Heights. And did I miss, are there any other organizations that I missed? Do we have anyone here who is here to provide public comment? I want to invite either applicant or staff to respond to any questions that were raised during this that have not yet been answered before we start closing out.
Yeah, I think the one question I heard a couple of times from Allison was about the amenity center. Yes, the amenity center, number one, is intended to serve the LIHTC, the affordable CAF program, these different terms. So the 1,335. And we have yet to determine, those details will be worked out, what happens with the new construction buildings. Approximately 400 of the 1,335 we'll probably have also some amenities in those buildings. We haven't figured out, how that sharing works, but overall, the amenity center, the main one we're talking about that's in the conservation area, is to serve those 1,335 units. And then just the other point I'd like to make, I do appreciate everything you guys have said for our team and staff, and we have worked hard, but I think these processes are just a testament to there's a lot of good ideas out there, and it's helpful to get more eyes and fresh looks at this. And I think your fresh looks and your comments have definitely improved the project, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hildy. Ms. Sondag, anything before we do final comments or closeout remarks? Is there anything that was raised that has not yet been raised that you want to cover?
No, but I'll just echo again my thank you to everybody for participating in this process. And yes, I think we do have a better project because of it. I think we continue to hear a lot of questions about the really kind of fine details of the project, a lot of level of detail that we will continue to review at the use permit level, both for the preserved areas, but also for the new construction areas. The AWG will be, the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group will continue to be a group that, reviews that finer level of details, but there will be some commission groups here that will see some of these projects come through, and we'll be able to look at those details at that time.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone in addition to thanking staff and the applicant, I want to thank everyone who spoke for the comments that you gave. I couldn't have said it better myself, and so I am not going to try to, but just echoing so many of the remarks that have been made, and thank you to all of the applicants and the staff of the applicant and their colleagues, and to county staff. Ms. Puskar, I see your light, your camera is on, if there's anything you want to add, and then I'm going to go, I believe, to Ms. Sontag for any final either administrative or other closing remarks.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for for hosting us, for Olivia and Matt for leading the process. It's been intense. Like I said at the beginning, it's been a lot of work, not only on our part, but so many community members showing up and providing really valuable input that has helped us to get to where we are today. We still have more work to do, and we look forward to kind of moving the whole process forward and realizing improvements out there on the property. So thank you.
Thank you. And I would be remiss if I let my co-chair, Eric Berkey, go unrecognized.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, I meant to say that as well. So, sorry. Yes.
Well, I assumed that by you, I assumed that by you meant me and Eric, because I know that Eric did as much, if not more, than I did. So I certainly heard that. But I also want to acknowledge Eric's work. Thank you, Ms. Puskar. I couldn't have done it without his co-chairmanship. Thank you. Ms. Sontag, speaking of people that we couldn't have done this without, is there anything that you want to go over administratively or to keep our minds up, keep our eyes open for, et cetera?
Yes, I do. I know we're short on time, but I do want to bring us back to these planning principles that we've established for each topic. We haven't heard any additional feedback over email or I believe in the evening this evening. But if there are any final comments on these principles that will be kind of we'll continue to bring these forward to commissions as we go through this review of the MFDP, but would love to hear any final comments.
And we still have 10 minutes and no public comment, so it would be to colleagues on the working group, it would be entirely in order if you wanted to chime in, but also mindful of Ms. Sontag's note that this isn't the last time that that there will be opportunities to weigh in on these documents as well.
I put it in the chat, but are we getting copies of these slides tonight from both Gerald Lynch and county?
Both presentations are posted on the land use webpage.
Okay, thank you.
Olivia, I don't know, excuse me, we did make some updates like adding the acreage to those open spaces. Do you have our most recent, I'll just make sure Lauren sends you our most up-to-date one to be posted.
Yeah, go ahead and send that to me and I'll get that updated this evening.
Thanks. Thank you.
And Ms. Van Hyde.
Hi, I had so many points that I wanted to raise in my comments that I forgot to say thank you to all of you for the wonderful work that you've done. Mike and I really appreciated being part of this, and we really, really do hope that somebody can come to our June 3rd meeting. I don't know who we coordinate with that, but there are so many wonderful challenges and opportunities to improve the bike ped infrastructure for Barcroft residents and for those of us who might be passing through, that it'd be a really good discussion. Thank you.
Ms. Van Hyde, at a minimum, I would suggest that you send Ms. Sontag an email, and if she's not the right person, then I'm sorry, Ms. Sontag, to put work on your desk, but I think we can be confident that she'll route it accordingly if need be.
I will do that tonight, and it doesn't have to be a major presentation, but just focusing on the bike ped issues that are raised and some background, because a lot of us have been totally unfamiliar with this project, and it's a fabulous project. And I thank the county and all of you for the hard work that you've been doing. Thank you. I will be emailing you, Olivia.
Perfect. Yes, we'll coordinate offline. Thank you.
Anyone else with anything to weigh in, especially on these four proposed planning principles, Ms. Stallhead?
So I just had one comment, and maybe this is for as a goes through the commission review process. You know, I don't see anything very specifically on accessibility in these principles. And so, you know, I was sort of looking for that and we sort of get close to it, I think, in a few places. And so just as it goes through the process, I guess for the various commissions that review it going forward, I'd like to see something, I guess, kind of public or something put in the principles, just mentioning accessibility as part of what we're really focused on. We did talk about it quite a bit through this process.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. We'll take a look at where we might be able to add that.
Daniel, can I chime in here?
Please do.
Derek. Yeah, I would like to align myself with that comment. I think that's a great point, and not just for traditional population, but you know, the communities that we normally think of. I think the challenges of topography have maybe been belabored at length, but they're real, and it's very obvious when you are walking around. And so I think that is a universal concern, even for folks who may not typically have accessibility challenges, thinking about parking, especially on-street parking, getting around the site at night. That accessibility, I think, is paramount. And I also just wanted to say, thanks for the nice words, and I appreciate your leadership. You chaired most of the meetings, Daniel, and you know, this in addition to your regular AWG chairmanship role. So thank you very much for driving this process. And I think, again, I just think we landed at a really nice place. And the thing that's wonderful about this process is I think everybody now feels like a champion of this process. And I think that's going to be so helpful as this moves forward towards, you know, the county board, but even beyond, because we're thinking in terms of years, decades, possibly. And so I hope everybody continues to stay engaged and feels, you know, investment and ownership in the success of this project. Thank you.
You're here. You're here. Thank you. Ms. Sontag, if is there anything else that you want to add before we close out?
No, I think that's everything, but we'll be coordinating with commission liaisons to get this item on the respective agendas. So you'll see it coming back to you sometime soon.
Well, thank you again, everyone. I am pleased that we have a little bit of extra time, but more to the point, I'm pleased with the work that's been done, and that's thanks to all of your good insights and thoughts and diligence. So, with all of that, we are adjourned until next time.
Many thanks, everybody.